a supernova.
Welcome back to Pagitt Radio. We're with author Jana Riess and her book Flunking Sainthood, a year of breaking the Sabbath, forgetting to pray, and still loving my neighbor. We brought you in with a little Bruce Springsteen. It's hard to be a saint in the city, Jana. Are you a Bruce Springsteen fan by any chance? Because I'll give you a whole set of practices on sainthood.
Really?
According to Saint Bruce. But I do want to ask you a little bit about that, because you've written this very clever, fun book that I think many people will connect with in their own experience of trying to be a religious person inside of the suggestions of others, right? That people suggest to all of us ways that we ought to live our lives. And for those of us who pursue spirituality, there's people who want to encourage us in how we ought to be spiritual in the world. And one of the things that I was interested in your take on, because you are a fun person, you tweet through the Bible on Twitter, and you write these clever books, and you write about, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like, you're a clever person who's tied into pop culture and are quite funny. And that's not normally what people get out of spiritual practices, is it? Like so many spiritual practices of any of the traditions are quite earnest and serious, but they don't really have a lot of fun in them. What do you think?
Well, first of all, can I just say thank you, because you just erased 4 very sad years of being unpopular in high school. I really appreciate that. Calling me fun, clever, cool, whatever.
Fun, clever, cool.
And my inner teenager is thrilled.
Well, excellent.
Yes. But the serious part of your question is, why are so many of these books about spirituality so heavy?
Oh, boy, they are.
They really are, many of them. And I think that we have, I don't know, I tend to resonate more with books that keep it real, where people are talking about their own failures fairly honestly, where they're willing to be vulnerable and also willing to laugh. Chesterton said that the only things worth laughing at are the fun things like marriage and religion. And I think we ought to laugh more about those things.
Yeah,
go ahead.
In fact, I just said to a friend yesterday, I have now decided that I'm not following anyone on Twitter who quotes G.K. Chesterton anymore.
Oh, my gosh.
They're just not fun, so I've stopped.
Why not? No, Chesterton is very funny.
I don't know. I'm just tired of him. I've just decided. Okay. I'm just capricious like that. I'm just a capricious, Twitter follower. But anyway, I think you're onto something. That why is it that spirituality and humor often seem to be in counterbalance with one another? I mean, they seem to be on these other sides. We get that a lot here on the show, right? We try to be a little fun, a little quirky, and a little quippy, and sassy. And people very often are like, I just don't know that religion and humor mixes quite so well. Did you explore any of that as you were poking around in the different streams of spiritual practices across different religions?
Well, your question just made me think of something that was cut out of the book. So if you have a galley copy of the book, there's a joke there that's not in the final copy.
Oh, I only have the final copies.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a little bit edgy, and the publisher felt uncomfortable with it. I talk about going to the gynecologist during the months that I was trying to practice hospitality, and I was looking for hospitality everywhere.
Nice.
And my gynecologist had knitted stirrup cozies for my feet. I was so touched by this, so women's feet wouldn't be cold. And I thought, wow, and so what I wrote in the galley, she's practicing Benedictine hospitality and welcoming the stranger as Christ should our Lord ever need a pap smear.
Yes.
Which I thought was funny, okay?
That is funny.
But it was just a little out there.
Yes, and they thought, well, that's just because I guess for a publisher, you can see that they just don't want any trouble. But it's not just the publishers, is it? It's this real sense that, and I wonder why no religious traditions have sort of formed around the practices of enjoyment and humor and lightheartedness. Like I don't even know if there, because in the traditions that you've suggested in the book, which I think are nice, because they're not only the Christian traditions, but they're practiced by people of different backgrounds. That so often the kind of the founder, there's a saint, there's a founder or someone who kind of articulates that practice particularly well, and I wonder why the kind of lighthearted and good-humored people don't tend to be the ones exalted in religious communities.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, maybe we should start one. Maybe we should start like the the spiritual practice of snarkiness or funny or something.
The ironic priesthood.
Yeah. And we could have we could have pilgrimages and all kinds of things around people having fun.
We could go to Graceland.
Hey, now you're onto something.
I would love that.
Do you think, as you've meddled around in these different practices and had to do research in different ones, that in religion is there a need for people to be saints? Like, is there a need for us to have someone who has been successful in religion in a way that the rest of us aren't? Like, does that play some sort of function for human beings in social structures, or what do you think this craving is for there to be saints within different traditions?
That's a very good question. I think that many of us feel the need for moral exemplars, for heroes, essentially. And
heroes,
some
yeah.
of my heroes, Dorothy Day, for example, who is not an official Catholic saint, but probably should be. She's a 20th century American woman who founded the Catholic worker movement and basically got her hands dirty every day caring for the poor. She was sort of the Mother Teresa of the United States. And in chapter 12 of the book, my practice was generosity, and I was trying to raise $4,000 for charity in the month where I was going to be turning 40. And so I had some friends donate to the Heifer Project for me, et cetera. But I was reading Dorothy Day during this time, and it was like just feeling completely inadequate at what she says that is required of us in terms of what we give. Here I am, I'm trying to raise this small, really in the drop of the bucket, small amount of money. It's a lot for me, but compared to the needs that exist that we all ought to be attending to, it's just nothing. Yeah, so it helps to know that there are people who are doing that, even if we can't quite get there.
Yeah, and that's one of the parts that I think makes religion difficult for some people is if they don't connect with the person who is kind of exalted in that tradition, then they find themselves maybe being on the outs of it, and it can be very, very emotionally difficult for someone, for them to feel like, "Wow, I can't ever achieve what the most exalted person in my faith tradition was able to accomplish."
In 1997, Mother Teresa and Princess Diana died within 1 week of each other.
Yeah, that's right.
And Mother Teresa's death was essentially unmarked by most of us because we were attending to Princess Diana's funeral and grief over her death. And I think that the difference in how people responded wasn't just about the fact that Mother Teresa was in her 80s and Princess Diana was in her 30s and she had 2 young sons. Obviously that's very tragic. But I think it was because we cannot relate to Mother Teresa in the way that we can relate to someone like Diana, who's totally a screw-up. She's
interesting,
insecure and loving and wonderful, but also really screwed up. And Mother Teresa is essentially perfect. At least we thought so at that time. After her death, her journals were revealed, and now we can read and say, wow, she had serious dark nights of the soul that we just didn't know about at that time.
She was just presented in such a way that was so other than the rest of us. Jana, can you stick around? I want to ask you about some things that you see happening in the landscape of religion in America. Is that okay? Can you stick around for another bit of another segment?
Yes, I'd love to.
Excellent. That's Jana Riess. Her book is called Flunking Sainthood. We're going to give it away in the next segment, so don't leave us. A year of breaking the Sabbath, forgetting to pray, and still loving my neighbor. Stick with us here on AM 950 and DougPagittRadio.com.
Attention Xcel Energy customers. Tired of paying high electric bills? All Energy Solar can help. Currently, for residential projects, Xcel and federal incentives pay for